Oh, that looks better. Aloha! Welcome to Live Yoga channel, where today we are having the Trust Your Guts Club, talking about all things yoga for the organs. Super happy to welcome you here. And today, let's chat about gut health and how it reflects mental well-being. Has anybody heard of that before? Have you ever sensed it within yourself? Maybe if you've had too much of a pleasurable experience, and then that leaves us feeling depleted the next day, or maybe even a few hours after. Let's talk about that today. Pleasure and what happens inside of our brain and then our entire system when we simply have too much. All right. So how Trust Your Guts Club works is I'm here chatting, but I'd love to hear from you. Please, as you come on, write some questions, ask me anything. And there's nothing that I don't feel comfortable, if I don't have an answer, we'll help to find one together. But I'd love to answer your questions around gut health, mental health, and how we utilize food as medicine to take best care. This is Mind Your Mito, and Mito stands for mitochondria in every cell. It's like where the ATP, the powerhouse of the cell, you probably remember that back from science class in school, but the ATP and what's going on in our mitochondria is what's so important. And this has the ability to help us feel good and pleasure, or feel crummy and uncomfortable. All right. So let me know you're here. Write some questions. Thanks so much for coming. And today, what we're going to talk about is all things dopamine. So these pleasure centers, they actually live inside of our brain. And inside of our pituitary is where we have these sensors. And what happens as we experience pleasure is that our thresholds increase. Have you ever noticed that? Alcohol is an easy one to talk about. But, say you had one glass of wine every night at 5 o'clock. Over time, might you need, or seem like you need a little bit more to have that same pleasurable buzz, if you will. All right. So that's an easy one. But same thing, what researchers are finding is same things with anything, but specifically, how about these devices? Have you found that the scrolling, it can come, become mindless, and we can kind of get stuck, I just need to look up one thing, and an hour goes by, and you're like, wait, what was I looking for again? And feeling drained in energy, the time that we spend on these devices is one thing to talk about, as well as, these screens. Like right now I'm using a computer. I haven't owned a TV for 20 years, but I still get plenty of media though through these devices. So what's happening as, to our nervous systems as we spend all this time looking at these screens, right? And so where social media platforms and such, let me be honest with you here. I don't like Facebook as much anymore. Yet one of my favorite parts are the Facebook memories, right? They just feel so warm and fuzzy. So, when I open up Facebook, it tells me what was going on, 5 years ago at this time. And, I like it, especially this month because of the holidays. However, Facebook lost its luster too. I don't know if you've seen The Social Dilemma, but I'll write that movie in here. It's a Netflix movie. And they do a really great job of explaining the science behind what's happening in our brains, and especially what's going on these screens. And a lot of the sites, the websites, they're designed similar to how Vegas uses colors and changing sights and sounds to stimulate pleasure and excitement, and basically it's stimulation. So have any of you noticed where we can feel overwhelmed or overstimulated? I have. I've been noticing it more so even in the last few months as we've been isolated. We've been doing this whole COVID situation so much. So now that like when I go out and I'm around some people, I can feel like easily overwhelmed or overstimulated. It's just much more than I'm used to these days. Whereas, a year ago this time we were out and about and doing different things here and there, and things have just changed so very much. So let's talk about a practice. Maybe you've heard online. It's quite popular, especially in the Silicon Valley and in Northern California. There's this term called dopamine fasting. And if you're like me, the term fasting is quite a term, and it can feel overwhelming or scary or like too hard to do. And what I want to share with you today is that we can practice dopamine fasting to help support our nervous system and our peace of mind. So as I mentioned earlier, dopamine lives in our brain, and it's a nervous system response to express pleasure, to experience sensations of pleasure. And that's wonderful, whether we're looking into a loved one's eyes, exchanging oxytocin, helping soothe the nervous system, whether we're biting into our favorite food or sipping on our most favorite beverage. We're tactile species and meant to experience pleasure. However, in our modern lifestyles, there's so much stimulation and pleasure that we're learning that what used to be pleasurable, now we need more and more of it to experience that same kind of pleasure. And that can come across in food, in scrolling time, in time online, movies, and drinks, and more. So dopamine fasting would be the removal of stimulation. And so don't get me wrong, if you look up dopamine fasting, you're going to get lots of information out there. And I'm here today to express that a little bit goes a long way. And if we can begin to build sustainable habits where we practice a little bit more often, we're going to give really good care to our nervous system and those dopamine receptors. Okay. So the first time I'd heard about this, maybe it was like 8 months ago. And one woman shared with me that how she was committing to a dopamine fast that was doable for her was that she was committing to not picking up her phone to check the messages when she was at a stoplight. So apparently, people are driving and we've gotten used to like, at a stoplight or when there's, time for a break, let me grab the phone and see what kind of messages I missed or, what kind of notifications that I have. And it's just, it just continues that like more and more. So this idea of committing to not reaching for the phone, that in itself is a really big deal, especially if you found that you like unconsciously reach for the device for some sort of pacifying experience. So starting with an audit to understand how do you best, how are you using these devices and where are we checking out to try and self-soothe? And it's other than the most ideal for us. So one idea is to find check yourself and see where are you spending a lot of your time. And if that is, keeping an alarm on your phone so that every 2 hours you take a break, and that break could include closing the screen and going outside and getting your bare feet in the earth. This is a practice that I use as much as possible to reset my dopamine receptors because I can tell sometimes I can feel literally frazzled from, being online, and there's just so much information and it's fast and such. So I love to take a break and then put my bare feet in the earth and let the vibration of the planet connect to my feet, which is where I take in, like, our feet and our palms is where our nervous system, so through touch, our nervous system can be soothed from the vibration of the planet. Now, that may sound really, wonky and out there, but give it a try. Give it a try. See if you can spend some time in nature, free from your devices, and just let yourself hear the sounds of nature. Let yourself connect to the sounds of the weather, whether that's rain or wind or birds. It's tuning. It's tuning in and paying attention to what simply is. So more and more, if you can find an hour a day or more, what many people are doing is one full day a week, turning off their phone, staying free from the device, doing light reading. A full dopamine fast would be without food, without screen time, very little talking, and even letting ourselves be free from staring into each other's eyes. Just it's the removal, it's deprivation of sensory perception. And so a full-on experience, maybe you've heard of deprivation chambers, where people get into water, salt water, and then just really dark, and that is a dopamine fast. But what I'm presenting to you today are small ways to incorporate dopamine fasting into your day-to-day habits. And what I'm going to invite you to do is take a look at where you're most addicted to the device, whether you just pick it up unconsciously. Do you find that you use your phone while you're eating? It's a lot to take in, So that could be a step one, to just put the device away while having a meal. Be free of it. Just be present with your loved ones or yourself and the tastes and the sensations. So what happens after your committed time of your dopamine fast, whether that's the full day, whether that's an hour here, an hour there, whether it's several breaks throughout the day where we free ourselves from the stimulation, especially the overstimulation, what it does is then when we come back, we have experiences where it's pleasurable again. Food tastes better. Conversations feel, meet more needs for connection and authenticity and intimacy. Touch and sex is even more exciting. And our experience for life is it's more pleasurable again. So if anything today, thank you for joining and considering what a dopamine fast might look like for you. And leave a note, write a message, send me a message. I'd love to know how you're trying this and how it's working out for you, because we can feel a little bit dull, and so have you ever had a time in your life where you've just felt kind of bored or depressed, or nothing seemed to be very pleasurable? This is a sign that the dopamine receptors in the brain and the nervous system are, overtaxed, overburdened. So there are ways that we can give our bodies a break. And this is such an incredible human design, knows just how to repair itself. So consider what a dopamine fast could look like for you. Try it soon and often for your own mental well-being and your pleasurable experiences shared with loved ones. So thanks so much for joining. If you have any questions, let me know, and we'll see you next week. Have a happy holiday this week, and we'll see you next week here at the Trust Your Guts Club. A hui ho.